Mind over matter, overcompensating, overstatements, crookedness relative, the soul's churn in return, mental overstimulation, one word, riveting.
Okay.
Greetings. Welcome back to Mad Poet Podcast. I am Alex Murdoch, the Mad Poet. Good to be here. Yes, I'm looking forward to this one. And this man's such a plethora of information and experience. It's a pleasure to have you on. A special guest, Mr. Well, let me just share this first. Debut novelist, The Bystander, I believe is the title.
17 hours.
Pardon me, that's my my laptop. The Bystander is the name of your book. Long-time public relations and crisis communication consultant, Mr. John David. Welcome to my Poet Podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to have you on, and congratulations on all your success and your book. It's great to see,
Thank you.
Expression is very important. I'll just share, a quote for this episode, and then we can get into our conversation. The fine light feeding my sunny side, turning like the roses, roaming for a less concrete plight. Bloody red, I scrape at times, seldom aches to unwind. We live to expand. The sweetness exists in the confines, as does the finite. Hangs from Superman's cloak like kryptonite, egging the world not to live such a plight. Despite addiction is a cruel light, it shines bright, taking over our lives. Risky times, never being allowed to see the birth of our sweetest surmise. Did we ever try? Quagmire of sorts, but yeah, that's the quote for today.
It's great. It's going in a lot of places. It's going in a lot of places. A lot to think about.
Yeah, a lot of questions there, for sure. And I even finished with a question. Yes. Firstly, I wanted to hear about your book. Could you tell my audience about, your book, Bystander, and that experience, being a novelist, and what sort of kind of comes with that sort of thing from your point of view?
Sure. So it's my debut novel. It's called The Bystander. It was published in September of 2025. Just so at the time we're recording, it's November. I'm not sure what time when you'll air this. But so it's just about 8 weeks out. So it's pretty much still new. It's my first novel. It's a mystery with some thriller elements in it. And the story behind the book is that it's a television reporter films an active shooter incident, and where the active shooter is killed by an armed bystander. And but the video footage that the television reporter gets goes viral, and it turns into this big, huge national story. But all is not as it seems. So that's the premise. The premise for the novel. I think you're muted again, Alex.
Sorry.
There we go.
I'm very curious about because and the reason why I wanted to, because I really wanted to tap into the process of, getting to the point of being published. Um,
Sure.
Perhaps you could share some of the challenges that you sort of somewhat veered into um, creating, commercial fiction, or somewhat um, getting your work, ready.
Sure. Oh, it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. So I have a couple of perspectives on this. So the first is that um, I've been a writer my whole life. I was in went to journalism school and I studied public relations in college, and then I worked as a publicist and a marketing consultant. Still do actually. I'm still a full time PR and marketing guy, and I do crisis communications and I do some ghostwriting and things like that. And as what I do for my career. And about it was in 2016, I wrote a business book,
Mm.
and I just came up with an idea for a business book, and I didn't really know anything about the publishing world at all. And I went through the process. I actually learned how the nonfiction world works, and I have an agent who represents me for nonfiction, but and it actually went pretty smoothly. I had an idea, I pitched, reached out to a bunch of agents. Fortunate that one of them liked my book and signed me to be his client, and then he pitched it out, and we got a publishing deal, and a year later my book was out, and it was great. Great experience, learned a lot. It's been a great marketing tool for me. And then about 3 years ago, I had an idea for a novel. So, and it was based on this actual thing that happened. There was at a mall in Indiana. A guy went into a mall in Indiana with a assault rifle and started shooting. He killed 3 people, and it's a tragedy. But and at the mall that day was a young man who had his handgun with him. He had a concealed carry permit, and he took his gun out and he shot the active shooter, and he killed the active shooter. And the young man's name is this happened in a mall in Indiana. The young man's name was Eli Dickin. He was the guy who killed the active shooter. And he's a hero, I mean, he's a bona fide hero. I mean, he's a guy who really actually, risked his own life to save other people. I mean, it doesn't, we throw around that word hero a lot. People say, "Oh, you're a hero," but this guy's like a real hero. And it just gave me an idea, and I started thinking about that, and I was like, I had a lot of conversations about gun issues and gun control. I'm in the United States. We have these really, I don't know, interesting gun laws compared to other parts of the world. And I've had a lot of conversations with people about gun issues, and I thought to myself, this could be an interesting backdrop for a novel. I think I could write a novel about this. And I took the idea and I wrote it, and it took me about 5 months to get to the point where I had a first draft. And then I went through the whole process of, I found an editor, hired an editor to review it for me and help me, make it better and get it into a format that I thought would be close enough that I could publish it. And then I started the process of trying to find a publisher, and it's a battle, man. It is a slog. The literary agents in the fiction world, they are the gatekeepers to the big 5 publishers. There's 5 major publishers like in the world, publish English language books, whether in the US or the UK, wherever you are. They all have, what they call imprints, which are other companies underneath them, but they're all controlled by 5 big companies. And basically, to get into one of the big 5, you have to go through an agent. And there's a whole process you go through. You have to put a package together that has information about your book, and then you're emailing them or you're submitting it to agents through their websites and stuff like that. And it's a slow, a slow grinding process. And for me, I mean, I went through it. I spent I spent 18 months trying to find an agent. I ended up reaching out directly to some independent presses, independent publishers, um, and that's where I found my publisher. That's where I actually don't have a literary agent now, but I have for fiction. But the publishing company, published my book, and it came out. I had conversations with them last year in 2024, and signed an agreement to write a 3-book series, and they published the first one came out in September 25, and the second one's completed and is coming out in May of 26, and I'm working on the third one. And that's kind of the backbone of my tale.
I mean, it's quite a tale, and that's the part of the process that I think a lot of people don't necessarily hear a lot about, and the process that and the issues that the surrounding issues that goes with that. So I thought it was interesting to just sort of tap into that and just highlight um, specifically what you go through, because this is your book. Of course, it's all great to have it out there, but what was it like for you, and
Sure.
what you went through?
Yeah.
Because that's an exclusive lens, and there's a certain mindset, I would imagine, of an agent, and pertaining to what they're looking for, and what they're like, for you to publish. So there's a fine line, isn't it? There's a somewhat of a compromise, perhaps, to find that niche between the writer and the agent, sort of thing. So that's what I'm really curious about. And so are there any ideas or ideals or things that you could perhaps allude to, pertaining to like an agent, and what's easy for them and what's hard for them, and what's like
I it's a great question. It's a question without an answer, Alex. I'll be honest with you. It's a big question. It's a huge question. Um, you know, the literary agents, I don't have one, so I don't have a fiction agent. So I've read a lot. I've talked to a few, um, and they're running a business. They're trying to find books that the publishing world wants to buy, and they're the intermediary, right? That's what they're trying to do. And so I think some of it is that, and then at the other end of the equation, you have you have the publishers who they're they're keenly aware of what's selling, right? And which way, and they're aware of which direction they think the market's going and things like that. And then you have on the other side, you have I don't really call myself an artist, but I mean, I kind of create, I'm creating a work of fiction, which is kind of like a piece of art, right?
I would
Not
call
in
you
the
an artist,
not in,
but
not
carry
in the not in
on.
the not in the Picasso sense of art, but I mean, it's a creative endeavor, right?
Mm,
And and so I feel I wrote a mystery novel, and I felt very comfortable in that area. I didn't write a romance novel. I didn't write a fantasy novel. I didn't try to write an epic, whatever, Lord of the Rings type of thing. I didn't try to write something that was totally like rom com or comedic or anything like that. I wrote what I felt, the sort of this book sort of just came out of me, right? And and the what happens though is that the publishing world is trying to is looking for specific things, and they want your book to sort of fit in one of their lanes. And so you have to create something that the publishing world will like. So but at the same time, they want to see things that are innovative and that have a different voice and that aren't just the typical thing. And or that maybe haven't been done in a while, or that were, that, or it's a new spin on things. So it's very tricky to sort of take your, your art, right, and stick it stick it in a category, or drop it into a pile, right? Then this is what it is. So it's a very it's a tricky game, and the agents are in the middle of it, and they have a tough role, because they're the ones who are getting all these, they're getting these manuscripts, and he's getting these query letters from writers, and they're, trying to decide, is this something that's going to be worth my time to try to sell to, one of the many imprints of the big five publishers that control the bookstores.
Yes, yes, yes. I understand. I understand. It's one of those questions. It's more in theory, because we're not agents and we're not publishers, so we're not necessarily, we don't have that information. So you can only sort of kind of take a stab at it. But I was just more curious to your viewpoint or your thoughts on the topic. If not,
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, it's one of those things where, I mean, I'm an optimist by nature, so I think that helps me, right? So I also have a career in public relations and marketing, and I was a publicist, like a day-to-day publicist for 20 years, and so I spent a lot of time trying to convince, like, reporters and people who didn't necessarily want to take my calls, like, to try to convince them to write stories about things. So what happens is that comes with a lot of rejection. So I spent, 20 years with 95% of reporters, probably 98% of reporters telling me no, right? So I'm okay with that. Like, but but I think someone who's not used to that might have a much harder time in the publishing world, because you work on something, you wrote something, you feel very strongly about it, and now you're going to get a lot of people who are going to say they don't like it. No, they're not going to say they don't like it, like, per se. They're not going to say, oh, it stinks. They're just going to say, oh, it's not for me. It's not a fit for what I'm trying to look for, what I'm looking for, which is just another way of them saying that they don't think it's going to fly. They don't think it's going to be successful. And it's hard. It's hard because you're getting a ton of rejection. And here's the thing, but you hear the stories. There's classic stories. Stephen King, was turned down by a dozen agents, right, for his first book. J.K. Rowling had trouble getting her book published. She had an agent. She was turned down. I think she was turned down by something like 20 different agents. Is the mythology of it.
Yeah.
But then her book was at a publisher, and publishers weren't sure what to do with Harry Potter. And the story goes that I saw, and I should probably get it, make sure it's accurate before I repeat it on a podcast. But the story that I remember reading was that, one of the publishing houses, the guy took the manuscript home, and his daughter read it and said, this is really good, Dad, take another look at this. And he ended up signing, they ended up signing J.K. Rowling to write for the first Harry Potter books. So, I mean, like, there's it's in a certain degree, a certain bit of this, you need a little bit of luck, because even like Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, two of the most, influential, dominant writers of the past 100 years, right? And some people turned them down.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's quite the I mean, we were speaking about quagmires earlier on. It's literally like that. From the way I see it is, I sort of see it like, especially as a new writer on the scene sort of thing, because you haven't been published, or somebody that has something that is very different. I mean, you have to see it as a gamble on their part. This is not. You're not proven. This is not your second. You're not a bestseller. There's so many things that goes into it that you haven't. They don't know you. Let's go with that. I think there's a lot of favor that goes to people that perhaps coming from a background that writes, like, for radio or you've won an award or something along that line. I think those things is like it's somewhat tangible and it's something to allude to your competency. But at the same time, you're throwing something new at the market. And I think these, they're still humans. And I think this is the daunting aspect of
Sure.
their job, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And so perhaps that's
There's
the risk of it.
there was an agent. I read an interview when I was started pitching agents. There was an agent who I read an interview, and she was saying, and she like, what does she look for? And she said she said when she reviews materials from a writer, she's looking for information on. She wants the hook, the book, and the cook. And I was like, okay. And so what's the hook? The hook is like, okay, what's this book about? Why is this book different? Why is it interesting? Right? So that's like, okay, this is a fantastical story about a kid who, has a lightning bolt scar and goes away to this mythical school, right?
Yeah.
And then the book is a 92,000 word, third person story about a young sorcerer going through blah, blah, blah. He has two, and it's chronicles the adventure of the young protagonist and his two best friends as they, or, whatever. And
Yeah.
then so you got the hook, you got the book, and then the cook is, okay, who's the writer? And, the writer is, so then you have to say, okay, this is a person who, whatever, earned a Master of Fine Arts writing for this, or was a former reporter, or wrote a bunch of short stories, or, wrote screenplays, or whatever. Who's the cook? And so, you have to that's one agent. That's like one agent. What one agent's looking for. But that's generally how you query a book. It's like the hook, the book, and the cook. For me, I was like, I had the hook, I had the book. I didn't have any credentials as the cook. So I went out and put my book in some contests. I won some, which was good. Got some credentials that I could add on to my bio. Is why I said, there's nothing, I have nothing, I didn't, I've never written any fiction, no track record. I'm just a lunatic who thought he could do it. So, I went out and I submitted my book to a few different places, different awards, and I got longlisted for one in 2023, and that helped me. I think that helped me. And I've won a couple of awards since my book came out. So, trying to make myself look like a better cook. So it's a process. It's like, and you have to, the biggest thing is you just have to, create a good product, right? Create something that people are going to want, they're going to like, that's number one. And then you got to just keep pushing.
Yeah, you said it. And, I actually think the hardest is probably the first, because I think once you do the first one, you're most likely going to have some idea of a blueprint in mind that could probably take you to that next level where, and ultimately that's why it's the beginning, now I understand, okay. And you could just find a way, find a loophole or find a niche that you fit, and you can just be consistent after that. But you're right. Yeah, it's not an easy, and then that's why, it's not for everybody, I suppose. You have to actually want this, So the question is, how much do you really want,
Oh yeah, no, without question. I mean, it's a grind, man, and there's no doubt it's a grind. But I mean, and the other part of it is, I mean, I wrote my first manuscript, submitted it, and then I was fortunate that I started on a second one. I'd only just started it though, and then they told me they wanted a second one, or they wanted me to write a series, and so the second book was easier, and I think the second book's better, right? Because I think I was a better writer when I wrote it. I think I was better. I think I learned, and I think it's a better. I learned from the first one, and that's generally the human condition. Typically, we get better at things with practice, and so like for me, that's sort of how I feel about my writing, is that it's improving. whether, so that part I think is good. Whether or not the story is better, that's a whole other question. I mean, it's like, is the story better? But so much in the novel writing world, and I think in your world too, it's the story, but it's how you tell it, right? It's really what, in the end, there's only so many, there's only so many earth-shatteringly brand new stories you can have, right? Is how you tell it. And particularly, like when you talk about poetry or something, it's the, it's how you tell it, and it's that cadence that you're developing and that rhythm that you'd have, and it's the insightfulness behind it that makes the difference.
You're right. It's the voice, it's that uniqueness to your voice. And it's more to your advantage when people they can't locate where they've heard it before, or it's not familiar to them, but they know there's something about it that resonates with them. But at the same time, you still have to, your pen have to be mature, I would say. And that's to the point. I've always felt that I've always thought that writers are vintage. We age like wine. And you're supposed to be better as you replicate more stories and you start to progress into creating. Because unless you're somebody that you're a part-timer in terms of how you go at writing, then that means you're more likely not to be in touch with the things that you've learned, so you're not necessarily putting them into practice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
that's
think I think yeah, no, I think we all improve. I think that that's important, that you do better, that you feel like you're improving, and that's the nature of the beast, right? We want to do something new, we want to do something better, we want to do a new take, a new twist. You don't want to read the same book twice, It's easy to, you want to and yeah, and hopefully things do get better with age, unless of course, like a fine wine, unless, like, air gets to it and it turns to vinegar, then you got a problem. But yeah, but yeah, I think that and voice is really a big deal. I mean, I think that that's a critical thing, because I think you have the right. It goes back to what I was saying before, in that you have to have a great story, but a great story can ride on its own, right?
Mm.
For sure. But a great voice can do the same. Ultimately, you want both. Ultimately you want both. And I read a book recently by an author, and the voice was so good to me that I enjoyed the voice so much that I overlooked things in the story that I thought were, that normally I wouldn't. I mean, it's like, for me, I have to. I really don't like the when something is you know a lot of times authors don't know how to land the plane. They tell a story
Mhm.
and they don't know how to end it, and or they come up with something that feels like they're just filling space, or they're trying to add to word count or something, or they just come up with something that they think they need something shocking and they don't. But anyway, sometimes if the voice is really good, it will transcend those issues. It's like
Yeah.
same thing with a movie. It's like, well, like when sometimes you watch a movie and you're just like, oh,
Mm.
I love that movie until that moment when they did that stupid thing, and now it can't be on my list of top 10 of all time because of what they did, and the silly thing they did at the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things people love about branding. You might have the great branding, but it's a terrible product, but the branding is great, so I'm gonna buy it anyway. Because I just I'm committed
Yeah,
to
I
this
mean, in
brand.
the end, listen, like, in the beginning, Nike made really good running shoes, right? I mean, now there might be better ones out there now, or there might be ones that are better. There were better ones then, but they built, they made shoes that worked, that people liked, and that did the job. And it's the same thing with anything else. You go to the grocery store and buy a bottle of ketchup. It's the same thing. Um,
Mm.
you can buy a crappy bottle of ketchup, or you can buy a good bottle of ketchup. You can spend $4.99 on a bottle of ketchup, or you can spend $11.99 on a bottle of ketchup.
Mm.
I'll be okay with the $5.90 with the $4.99 one. But the thing is that there's a whole, and it's in wine. We can go all day on wine, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think that what's really critical in when you're doing creative things is that you've got to produce something that that your readership will enjoy, and that they'll like they'll want more.
Mm.
That's the big trick.
Absolutely, absolutely. We don't have much time, but I would like to ask you this last question.
Sure.
What does it mean to be at this juncture of your career? And I say this because it's an accomplishment to be where you are. One which I'd imagine you put a lot of effort into orchestrating or at least envisioning. So in this place that you are, like, what does that mean to
You know, I've been, uh, you know, a professional person for a long time, and I've worked with some really successful people.
you?
Um, I'm fortunate to work with them. That like not that their success is rubbed off on me, but that I've just here, and most the successful people are always looking forward, you know, and I'm a big believer in celebrating your successes and being happy and making sure that you're not that you don't weigh yourself down with um, unreachable goals, or
Yeah.
the one worrying about the one thing that went wrong, or whatever. So I'm looking ahead, right? So I wrote the second book in the series, which is slated for next in 2026. I'm still promoting my first book. I'm looking at how I can extend, how I that if that I can write more, that maybe I'll write a different type of series. Maybe I'll write something completely different, or a standalone and a different with a different type of twist to it. And to me it's like I'm looking ahead, like that's the way that I'm tackling this. That I'm what else can I do? I mean, if I can, I've written one book. I've got one that's coming out in in whatever it is, 6 months, 7 months. And then but I look at authors who've written 20 books,
Yeah.
and I okay, let's why don't we shoot for that? Let's what maybe we can we write two books a year for the next 10 years, and and have a real, have a list of significance or something. So
That's amazing because I was thinking about one thing, a commonality. That's another question that I was thinking about, a commonality from, wearing the different hats that you've worn that somewhat translate to the different experiences that you had with the different places that you work. Perhaps that's it. Nah, that's not for me to say, but um, perhaps that's the one thing, as somebody that looks ahead, you know.
yeah, no, I think you have to. Yeah, I think that you have to, and I think that that one, doing one thing doesn't preclude you from doing something else. As we've learned, as we've seen, I think over the past 10 years or so, there's so many people. I mean, almost every author that I've met, you know, um, they're not writing full time. I mean,
Mm.
they got a regular job like I do, and and they're doing the author thing as their kind of side hustle. Uh, and every once in a while I meet somebody who's doing it full time, and even then, there's people who you just don't. It's pretty rare. So there's a lot to be done, a lot to strive for in the publishing world.
I agree. I agree. You're right. Even if, people that are doing this full time, they do have other adventures or things that they want to do because you have to imagine most likely, a lot of people in this field or, in these pursuits are creatives by nature. So, creatives tend to have a lot of different, their skill set can apply to a lot of different things. So all it takes is to have interest in those different directions, and a presto, you have something else that you can somewhat perhaps monetize.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
I
So
agree with that.
it's that simple.
I agree with
Man,
that.
this is fun, man. It was a pleasure to have you on, and thank you
Thank
so
you very
much for
much.
giving me some of your time. It was quite
I appreciate it.
interesting, just to hear your viewpoint, especially on, the industry and what you went through and how you. But the most important thing I would say to take away from it, people who are listening, is just how you persevere, and you just figure it out because that's what it takes.
Yeah, no, listen, I didn't know anything about the publishing process. I mean, I knew a little bit about the publishing world, but not that much.
Mm,
But that's, to me, that's part of, I think that's another kind of through line in my career is, you know, somebody says, "What do you know about this?" And I'll say, "I don't know, but I'll help you figure it out." Like I'll learn about it, and that's one of the things that's you learn the industry. And one thing for creative people, I mean, aside from just like plugging my book, right? My one thing would be saying to creative people is, you have to you got to believe in your work, and you got to believe that it's good. You've got to like work on your craft and all those things. And and if you develop a good product and you develop a good, and it's not a creative product, whatever, great, if meaning a book or poems or screenplays or whatever it is,
yeah,
if you believe in it, no one is going to advocate for you more than you, right? There's no one who's advocate for your work more than you, even though sometimes you get it in your head. Well, oh, if I just do this, then someone else is going to go, and no one's gonna care more about your business. No one's going to care more about your family. No one's going to care more about your kids. No one's going to care more about your book. No one's going to care more about your poem. No one's going to care more about your screenplay than you. So you might as well become an expert in that world and understand it, everything, because you're going to be your biggest advocate. So
absolutely. You have the last word, sir. This was a pleasure, and thanks so much for giving me some of your time.
thank you, Alex. It was fun.
Thanks so much. Take care.